The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Pih podcast. I'm Sara Pih, your host, and today we have one of the thought leaders in cannabis brands, marketing, and innovation, Angela Pih, CMO of CCell, on the show today. Angela, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, so excited for this conversation, Sara. Thank you so much.
Oh, I know we have so much to talk about
I
today.
know we have so much.
But before we get into the real, well, this is also meat, but the different kind of meat that we're going to get into talking about, what was your first cannabis experience?
Well, I didn't know the terminology for it back then when I was in college. So it was, I don't know, I think it was like orientation week in the last year of college. All of us orientation leaders were hanging out before one of our events. We had a little bit of hash just to chill out before the evening activities. And after a couple of puffs, I started just staring at my hands for 3 hours, not being able to move. So I guess, we all know it's couch lock, right? But back then, I don't know what it was. All I thought was, this is really silly because I can have a perfectly good conversation with someone, but I'm staring at my hands and I can't move. So my brain is working, but my body is not behaving in the way that I want it to. So I think that was kind of like a really fun crash course into relaxation.
I love it. And you did it with hash. You bypassed the joint. You're like, let's just go there.
Yeah, let's just go. Well, in Canada, we have brickweed and hash, and we tend to roll hash balls in with tobacco and create blunts out of those.
That's right. I forgot you're Canadian.
That's right. From Toronto.
That's right. I grew up really close to the Canadian border because I'm originally from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I'm like, the Sault Ste. Marie was right there. And everyone always thought we were Canadian because of our accents.
Oh, well, Canadians, we travel around. We grew up riding our bikes well past sunset, and we never lock our doors,
Canadians are some of my most favorite people.
We make good friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love going up there. And then being on the West Coast, I always love going up to British Columbia as well. It's such a beautiful place. And I'm going to make a gross generalization, but everybody's always so friendly and nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always.
So when we're looking at the trajectory of your career, getting into cannabis and working in the cannabis industry, what got you here and what caught your eye, making you think that this was the jump that you wanted to take? Because as we know, I don't think I'm speaking for everybody, but generally when we've had jobs in like the normal world, making that jump to cannabis can sometimes be a time of self-reflection.
Yeah, I would say all the above. Prior to cannabis, I had spent 2 decades on global brands. So I built my entire career on global brands, CPG brands, working around the world. Or, as we mentioned, originally from Canada. So I've worked in Canada, I've worked in Europe, I've worked across Asia, and I've been in the US for quite some time here on the West Coast. And having worked on brands like Procter & Gamble, so P&G brands, J&J brands, Colgate, these are all household names, as well as, automotive and beauty. And then I transitioned into beauty and fashion. So my last non-cannabis job was the CMO for Halston, which is a iconic fashion brand. And from there, I had a moment in time back in 2019 where the brand was being sold to a company in New York, and I wasn't ready to move all the way across the other side of the country. And I had an opportunity to think about, what do I want to do with my career, with the experience that I had. I always credit Christina Wong, who I've known since 2013 as one of my friends from outside the cannabis industry. She actually told me about an opportunity with Papa & Barkley, who at that time was looking for a chief marketing officer. And she said, you should really look at that job because, it seems really cool. Cannabis is a really up and coming industry. And, I want to get into cannabis. So you should get this job so that you can hire me.
I love Christina.
I love Christina too. Yeah, when I met her, she was head of corporate communications for Tendon Greens. So, she brings incredible experience into the cannabis space. With that little nudge, I checked out Papa and Barkley. I probably watched all the videos on YouTube that Guy and Adam, had separately been on talking about the origin story of Papa and Barkley and its, wellness benefits and their commitment to really true plant medicine. And I really fell in love with the brand story. So I reached out to Adam, told him a little bit about my background. He wrote back to me right away. I would say 6 weeks after that, I got hired, and then 4 weeks after that, I hired Christina.
That's awesome.
And that was my beginnings into the cannabis industry. It was a very steep learning curve too, coming from fashion, beauty into cannabis, where it's a completely different world. It's still a startup industry. No matter what people say, it's, second innings. However, I don't think I could have landed in a better place to start off my cannabis career. Papa and Barkley was such a strong commitment to clean, to plant medicine, to education. So for me, my time at Papa and Barkley gave me the strongest foundation and almost a masterclass into cannabis.
Yeah, I can see that, especially because, I mean, they're a wonderful company in general. But when we were getting into legalization and we were starting to see brands coming in and the grown-up brands, like the ones that were like, that look like what you would see in like a CPG product in the non-cannabis world, they were top of the heap with that, especially with like, and I love the packaging, but I also love the fact that we were seeing brands like Papa and Barkley, and then we were seeing other brands that kind of had a lot of packaging and a lot of accoutrement that were coming with it. And that was when I was still working for a dispensary chain, and I would have people coming in, looking at me and going, am I paying for the packaging or am I paying for the product? It was a very interesting time where we were seeing a lot of shifts and people were trying to see like where their products belonged and what they were supposed to look like. And the public was also like, there were some people who it was their first cannabis experience after legalization. So it's like, oh, well, that seems normal. I mean, that's what I see in other places. And then you saw people who had been, is buying cannabis since the medicinal cannabis days in California. And they're like, wow, this is a shift. So it's like that whole, like with my org psych background, I always talk about like storming, norming, and reforming. And we were definitely, well, we're still in the midst of that. What am I talking about? But it was really something to see like how Papa and Barkley was just very, the packaging, the products, just the whole thing was
yeah. I think up until the pandemic, we had really aggressive metrics in terms of the number of demos and the number of events we did every month. So I think at the height of where the brand team was prior to the pandemic, we had 22 brand ambassadors who were, full-time, part-time, 22 brand ambassadors. Wow. That's not counting the marketing team. So, I mean, like right now in 2024, we think, oh my God, that's bonkers and crazy. How can you sustain 22 brand ambassadors all at the same time? But we also had crazy metrics. We were doing 200 demos or events per month. And we were gathering names. We were approaching that first cannabis conversation for so many. And there was a reason for that. Education is the tip of our spear in terms of normalizing the plant. And working for a company like Papa and Barkley enabled me to really dive in and jump in and make an impact. Papa and Barkley is Papa and Barkley because of what it stands for, because of the quality of the products, and because of its commitment to education, both within the dispensary and also outside of the dispensary.
Yeah.
And that's why it is the brand that it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember my staff, after doing an educational session, especially dealing with things like that they hadn't been familiar with before, like transdermal patches, and understanding, the process behind that and how to be able to utilize it. And also for people who might see that on a menu. Yes, the one to
I
three.
travel with these. I swear by them.
They're wonderful. And, people may see them on a menu and think it's a little bit spendy, but there was the conversations they had around education, showing people how to be able to use it in an efficient way, really captured the imagination of consumers, and people really got into it. And that's, purchasing it, using it. A lot of times, especially because of when we got into legalization, there was no longer sampling, which prior to that was the real way of drawing consumers in. Like, try it, if you like it, buy it. But to not be able to do that and to make that take that financial risk to purchase a product can be difficult unless you have the proper education behind it to capture the imagination. And then they're like, oh, let's try that. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. So I feel incredibly fortunate and very grateful for that start in the cannabis industry on Popham Barkley. It's just the strongest foundation possible, and a love for sun-grown, coming out from Popham Barkley as well, because all the plant material is procured, right? So that comes from some of the best farms up in Northern California, and only sun-grown. So we're talking about sun-grown, full spectrum in terms of our products. And that makes a huge difference in terms of, well, this is my belief. It makes a huge difference in terms of the efficacy of the product from sun-grown plants as well.
Absolutely. There's nothing like the sun. And that's one of the things that, we've noted, is that the sun-grown products, especially the ones that, are full spectrum, tend to have the best feedback. People tend to get the most satisfying experiences, whether they're using it medicinally or recreationally. And I think that's something we have to have more conversations about. And then after that, I remember like seeing you at Popham Barkley, but then after that, I just remember all the buzz when you're at CannaCraft, and especially around Gem and Jane.
Yes. Really fortunate to land at CannaCraft right after Popham Barkley. So if you think about Popham Barkley as one single brand on the regulated side in California. And then also I created the Popham Barkley CBD, which was the e-commerce side of the business for national expansion. We built a whole e-commerce platform. We were in some natural foods chains, and even our bombs, our CBD bomb, were in Equinox that were actually used as spa treatments for muscle relaxation. So from a single brand across regulated and CBD nationally, then going to CannaCraft with a portfolio of 12 brands across everything from edibles to and beverages to vapes and flower. That was pretty intense, just in terms of the steep learning curve about flower, about vapes, and all the different form factors. At that time at CannaCraft, marketing owned the margins, which meant that for every single SKU, or 300 or so SKUs, we had to really understand the margin and whether it makes sense to support that many SKUs across each one of our brands at that time. So I think that's one of the benefits of being in the cannabis industry that people don't talk about, is that it doesn't matter what your role is, but the importance of understanding business is so important. So when I was at CannaCraft, and I think I mentioned to you, I launched 70 new products, created a new brand, which is Gem and Jane, which we can talk about, and created a couple of flankers while I was there. The single most important aspect of our team being successful and me being able to drive those efforts was understanding supply chain.
That's huge.
I never had to understand supply chain in any other industry because somebody else took care of it. Somebody in production or somebody in procurement or somebody in logistics. But a marketing person didn't need to understand supply chain. We just need to kind of like put it out there and make sure that there was going to be velocity in terms of sell in and sell through. But here in cannabis, you really need to understand supply chain to create a successful launch and go to market strategy. Because 6 months, let's say, if you want to launch a new brand or you want to launch a new product, it's going to take a good 6 months to get that product from concept to being on shelf, and all of the steps in between. And not understanding the intricacy of supply chain will tank you.
That's something that a lot of people don't reflect on.
No, they don't think about the importance of really understanding supply chain and being super tight with your procurement teams, because whether it's hardware, packaging, input, formulation from an R&D standpoint, all of that really needs to be dialed in if you're really going to hit these dates, right? And for the cannabis industry, we have certain cannabis holidays, call it that, with 420, 710, Green Wednesdays. And you having worked and been in a really important position in a dispensary, understand that when you miss certain windows, you're kind of out for months.
Yeah, timing's everything. Besides the fact that, when you're looking at even just sourcing the plant material, that takes time.
The time of year, the amount of time for extraction, the amount of time for the 3 rounds of testing.
Yeah.
Getting it on the truck, getting it off, and in store, getting it merged. So all of that takes time.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, it's something to even like teaching consumers, like when they come in and they're like, "Oh, my favorite product isn't here," and it's like, well, it doesn't come out of thin air. It's it starts in the ground, and we go from there. And they're always kind of like, huh, because we are in this CPG world where they're very separated from what it actually is. They see this package, and it's like, it's just like going to the store and picking up, their favorite shampoo or what have you. They just think, oh, well, it's just constantly made. That's how it is.
So when we think about the difference between something that looks very CPG,
right,
like a vape cart, this is like a Jetty vape cart, or something that's very organic, like this from Moon Made, which is
I recognize that Moon Made Cola.
Yeah, I love it. So to really understand that these products are perishable.
Yeah.
They're products that are perishable. They need to be kept fresh. They need to be kept in a certain amount of temperature to preserve the integrity of the plant, so that when you enjoy it as a consumer, it's giving you the full expression of what Tina intended,
Yeah.
And even when you're getting it in a vape cart, that extracted oil from the plant matter that gets to you within a certain amount of time, if the cart has been exposed to light or it's been exposed to heat or certain kind of pressures, then that's going to affect what's inside as well. So when we think about CPG, because people say, oh, it's so lifestyle oriented, it's like very much CPG. Well, it's not like CPG. A lot of the learning from a marketing and a business standpoint you can bring into a development of a brand, but ultimately is still working with a perishable good.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at the evolution of the industry and the products that come out, it's changed a lot too, because when we look at marketing, and people will buy products that they relate to, that they feel comfortable with. Like when I would have people who would come to the dispensary and they would be interested in something to help with a certain need. I would not only do you need to address that need, but you have to address the format that resonates for you, because if you pick up something that doesn't resonate for you, it's going to end up in a drawer and you've just wasted your money.
That's right. So, I have lots of packaging around me, so I got lots of show and tell,
I love it.
Does this work for you? Does this work for you? Because, where I have inside, because sometimes if you think about, maybe a soft gel is something that you need, right? A soft gel versus a vape, and as a bud tender, getting to or doing the appropriate discovery with a customer who's coming in as a potential patient, who's looking at cannabis as a way of feeling better. That form factor is really important, because that is it going to be a form factor that customer is going to be comfortable with in terms of its consumption method, right? And also, the potency, which we all talk about, go slow, start slow, go low, start slow, right?
Yeah.
Want them to have a bad adverse reaction from their first cannabis experience because that might turn them off forever.
Yes, and we have a lot of people who return who have had a bad experience and they get very nervous about, will I have that happen again? But it really is that conversation about dosage. Even though it's legalized, it doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all. It's just like, and I hate to make the comparison with alcohol, but it's like, just because you can have alcohol doesn't mean you're going to drink the whole bottle. Like, that there's an amount that works well for you. And I think that one of the things that I've noticed with cannabis, especially people who are either new to it or returning to it, the two top ways of people kind of warming up to it is topicals. I used to jokingly refer to topicals as the gateway drug. But also beverages. And, when beverages first started coming out, a lot of the people who'd been in the industry for a while were like, whatever, beverages, blah, blah, blah. I only smoke. And it's like, yeah, well, that's great for you. But for people who are looking to use it in a way that's familiar to them, especially with like the nano emulsions, having something fast acting, like over COVID, we have a big garden in our front yard, and that's where we'd entertain during COVID. We'd have friends who'd come over, hadn't used cannabis in years, and we'd do like a low dose cannabis beverage and bring it out. And they'd be like, wow, okay, I relate to this. Like, before, like with that book that came out, The New Chardonnay, and that was pre-cannabis beverages, I was like, oh, come on. But when the beverages came out, I was like, literally like, well, I mean, now there's a format that people who don't necessarily like to smoke or are worried about, having edibles because they've had a bad experience, this is something they can relate to. This is something fast acting, low dose, easy to use, tasty now because of, the way it's done. Like beverages in the past were downright disgusting, and
well, it's completely unintimidating.
Yeah.
When you pick up a can of infused beverage, it could be 2.5 milligrams. It could be 5 milligrams. It could be 10 milligrams, right? You wait for the onset, and it feels very unintimidating to be, picking up something that is bubbly and tastes yummy, and it gives you a lovely little buzz. And, in our culture, in our culture, I would say having a couple of drinks is very normal.
Yeah.
And as part of social engagement, when we're getting together at a barbecue or a cocktail at the end of the night, having 1 or 2 drinks feels very normal. So as we think about normalization of the plant, what are the already entrenched consumer behaviors around beverage consumption that we can naturally tap into? Because some people might not feel so comfortable hitting on a vape or smoking a pre-roll. I always think that if you're not comfortable with smoking and you're not going to smoke, you're never going to smoke. So that form factor is not going to work for you.
Right. And also when you look at
other options.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, going out with friends in the past, like, it's not that I don't drink, I just don't drink a lot anymore. I prefer to use cannabis. And being at a bar, ordering a non-alcoholic beverage, but then having to step away from my friends to go out to the curb and smoke a joint and come back in isn't necessarily, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not the most social thing. It would be much nicer to be able to consume with people when they're consuming. Because that's
part of the whole social experience of
Right.
hanging out with one another, right? So that, you're consuming, but you're consuming something that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And at times I would say, you're consuming something that's probably better for you than alcohol.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, going into the cultural, social part of it, as both of us are women who come from, well, my mom is white and my dad is Iranian. And, it's like, and you coming, being Chinese, and like our cultures have very different views on cannabis, although rich histories. Like when I was teaching a bunch of Chinese medicine practitioners, we got into the conversation about it being part of the pharmacopoeia and Ma being a very important part, but we also got into the conversation around why there's stigma and with the opium wars and colonization and things like that. And I'm curious, like for our listeners, if you would let them know, like your family, when you got into this, what their view was on that.
Are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sara Payan is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sara Payan has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsara.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
I had a very favorable experience because I grew up with traditional Chinese medicine ever since I was really little. So this is just part of the wellness practice within our household. So I grew up with, bowls of brown broth that were boiled down from bark and twigs and berries and other plant ingredients. And most of the time that stuff tastes really horrible. Have you ever had like boiled bark and such? It's really horrible. But, Chinese medicine has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And we believe that plant medicine hones in on the source of your ailment and actually helps you alleviate not just, not like symptoms like you're having a headache or something like that, although acupuncture is really great for headaches. But it's not about treating the symptoms. It's about treating the root causes of what's ailing you. So it feels more like deep integrative healing that you get from plant medicine. And when I think about the cannabis plant, it's a plant. It's a plant with incredible healing properties, with so many different, different varieties and so many different expressions and hundreds of cannabinoids, right? That we barely tap the healing properties of what's available to us as a single plant with its multiple varieties. And therefore, when my parents had heard that I'm going into the cannabis industry, they were actually really supportive.
That's cool.
They didn't think about it as like, oh my God, you're a marketing professional going into drugs or something. My dad actually thought it was really exciting to take my experience going into a new industry and seeing what's going to develop out of it and being part of the newer wave of this industry, bringing outside experience into something that's just getting excited. And like we were talking about before, in the cannabis industry, it allows us the opportunity to learn so much more about the business of the industry, while in more established industries, it's been around for so long. Within your scope of work, you're only looking at like a really small quarter of it.
Yeah.
And in this industry, we get to see everything.
I think it's a call to critical thought. Really like dialing in and like looking at the big picture. And I
yes, everything is interconnected within our industry. The education, the plant matter, the marketing, the sales, the customer, and even within our our country, within the US, every single state is at its own level of development and its own cycle of development. So we're, what are we looking at? Like 25 different countries within one country, right?
Yeah, well, it is, because it's, as going into the different states, the state cultures are also so different, and that really dictates like how these policies come out. Like I'm always surprised when I see, oh, we allow this, but we don't allow that. And I'm like, is this based on fact? Not so much. Is it based on stigma? A little bit. Is it based on culture? Oh, you bet your butt it is. It's like there's so much going, but it's fascinating. And as we get into normalization, how does that change the state cultures too when they start looking at, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe we do need this to help certain people. Maybe this is, this is a revenue source that we haven't considered and we should be looking at that.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of the states in their own development level are looking at the revenue aspect of it from a state perspective, and that's definitely hampering or facilitating the growth of the cannabis industry in their particular state. I mean, I think we can spend 3 days talking about that aspect of it. And there are people around who are more expert than I. But yeah, once again, from a business standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, the different stages of development for the cannabis industry, whether it's California, Colorado, Washington, or we're looking at the East Coast, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess in a generalized conversation, when you're looking at what's going on throughout our country, and I mean, we could get into international, but that would be a much longer podcast episode. But what do you think some of the challenges are of the current landscape?
Oh boy.
And I know it's a big question, so you can answer it any way you wish, and you can totally cherry pick, Angela. I won't mind.
I'm gonna talk about retail.
Yeah.
And because this is an area that you know so well. I think one of the challenge of our industry across every single state is the relationship that brands, consumers, and retailers haven't quite figured out what's that level of being able to work with one another and support each other.
Yeah, I agree. I think, one of the biggest disconnects, I think, is some brands get it, some brands don't. Some retailers get it, some retailers don't. Is that the bud tenders are your marketers. They're the lifeblood. And I think one thing that has always annoyed me, and I think especially because one of the biggest challenges was being middle management and then working in a retail environment where all of a sudden everyone thinks that because you're behind a bar, you're less than, and you don't understand things and you're not well educated. Because I'd always have people coming to me, how do I get a job like yours? Wanting to come into the industry. I'm like, well, you get cancer in your late 30s and then you go from managing everybody to going behind the bar of a dispensary and learning a lot. And when we're kids and we're doing retail, and I think everyone should have a retail job at one point in their life. But when you're a kid and you're doing it and you're being treated like crap, you just expect it because you're young. You're like, oh, well, that's how it is. But then you go back when you're an adult and you do it and you start to see it. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. This has nothing to do with my youth. This has to do with what my perceived station is. And it's really, it really shortchanges a lot of things for people to look at it that way, because there's a lot of really engaged, intelligent people working at the bud tender level. And it's an amazing entry into the industry, having an understanding that a lot of people who may have jumped in from other areas and not had that retail experience don't get to have. I think that we're
not going in, folding t-shirts at Gap.
Yeah.
We're actually imparting important information about how the cannabis plant can help you feel better, or help you have a better laugh, or how to, re-engage and find some mobility. So, or help you with anxiety and sleep. So, that the role and the importance of what bud tenders, I'm hugest advocate of bud tenders. They're our frontline people. They're the faces of our industry. And especially for a retailer, they could make or break your impression with your customers and potential customers, right?
Oh yeah, they're the navigators. And if you give them the professional development and education that they so need and deserve, you've just got an evangelist for your products.
Mm-hmm. Evangelist for life. I know going back to Papa and Barkley, when a bud tender says, this is what I recommend to my, for my family, then I know we've done the right job. We've done a good job. We've created great products, because it's who you recommend to the people you love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what, even in some dispensaries, like when you see somebody goes to and they get some smaller brand that doesn't have like the marketing dollars, they're not everywhere, but they're like a true blue believer in that. It's because a bud tender told them about it.
Right. And then it's going to move, it's going to move. So back to your original question in terms of the biggest challenges across all states.
Yeah.
It's interesting that retail within the industry has developed from a mom and pop type of setup to single stores, and then they might get a little bit more sophisticated and become multi-stores within one state. And then, next level is you might be part of an MSO that you're across multiple states, but it's still under the banner of your store name. So within the store, I love the ecosystem of how does a brand communicate to the bud tenders? How does the bud tender communicate to our patients and our customers? How do you merchandise a store? How do you communicate with your customer? What's the right cadence? So I think there's a huge amount of innovation that's possible within our retail level, because I think that's where brands struggle with the most. And I think that's where consumers have a positive or negative experience in terms of purchasing cannabis products.
Yeah, it's ground zero for cannabis. It's like if you can't make an impression there, you've lost a lot of people. And then when we're looking at that, I think about the company that I worked for, mom and pop, grew, became part of an MSO.
Yeah.
And then you look at the identity of what it started out as, and then you see it on the East Coast and how it's very different. Yep. It's it's an interesting thing, because it kind of goes, it's very much like what we see in other industries, where it's like a company has a special sauce, another company loves that, they acquire it, but then they forget why it is.
Oh, you mean like Whole Foods and Amazon?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I used to be so loyal to Whole Foods, but after a couple of not so good experiences post purchase, I don't shop there anymore, because a lot of what Whole Foods stood for and how it showed up at the store level was no longer apparent, both in terms of its staff, but also in terms of its merchandising.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing for companies to consider when they're looking at this. And I'm always confused as to why the same mistake continues to happen throughout all the industries. This isn't even just cannabis, because like you're saying, Whole Foods and Amazon, because there's that connection that we make with consumers. Like, I remember somebody coming into the store once and being like, "Hey, Sarah, I could get my cannabis somewhere else for way less expensive, but I come see you because your staff are well educated, they're compassionate, and I always learn something. Like, I'm always very satisfied because I feel heard." And I think, we can't cover the bases for every single person in our population with every brand and every retail outlet, but we could have more thoughtful conversations about who it is that we're trying to attract, and maybe thinking about the people that have been forgotten in this, because there's a whole swath of people that may not even be wanting to use it for euphoric purposes, but just for general wellness.
Yeah, and doing the work, actually having a really good conversation. So, going back to Christina, she works at Cornerstone. Yeah. Amazing dispensary here in LA. And, the amount of thinking, the amount of dedication and commitment to the cannabis plant and cannabis knowledge, really supporting brands and supporting their patients. So just when you experience that at that kind of level, it makes all the difference. So that's why a customer will go back to a store over and over again, even if they're paying a little more.
Yeah, that's it. And it made perfect sense that Christina would go work there because
Mm-hmm.
of, she has an amazing reputation around normalization. I just remember the first time I saw her doing a video making pasta with fan leaves in it. I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. But, her conversations around normalization dovetail so nicely into the work that Cornerstone's been known to do for years. And that gets into, you know, women in leadership roles or women as, kind of some the mouthpieces for cannabis really getting the information out. We don't have as many women in leadership in cannabis as we should. Hell, we don't have as many women in leadership in the world as we should. But I think that part of that is really having more of that is where we have these nuanced conversations and we see these supportive environments that actually drive retail sales. Not to say that we don't have very sensitive, lovely male counterparts in the industry. They do exist. But I think women do lead the conversation on that. And I wonder what your view is with women in leadership in cannabis.
I think we've seen the numbers over the years actually come down in terms of women in leadership roles, women in C-suite, that there's been fewer of us across the board. I think that, yes, whether it's this industry, any other industry, we need more women in leadership. The way we approach leadership and to approach being a leader is very different, I believe. We look at it from a more of a holistic standpoint. And I would generalize to say that we listen more. And we're very strong integrators. So how can we support more women within the industry? In the last few years here in California, the industry has been going through a lot of hard, tough times, whether it's the pricing compression or it's retailers not paying, or, a lot of businesses have either been roughing it or had to go out of business altogether. And it's been really sad. And seeing that the number of women who've remained in the leadership roles across the larger companies within cannabis, and not in addition to looking at women-led companies with women-founded companies, I feel that we're probably seeing more women in leadership roles within companies that they founded.
Yeah.
And less so in terms of women who are rising and put into positions of leadership within more the larger or more established companies within cannabis. So I'm actually, seeing that sort of a movement that women still need to be heard, want to be heard, and have incredible expertise to bring into the cannabis industry, but they're probably finding it easier if they were developing a brand or leading a company of their own within the cannabis, versus having to fight against, should we say, bro culture in some places, or just the prejudices and just the subtleties that you and I've talked about before in the past, that maybe it's not worth it. And kind of like, well, I know I'm really good at what I do. Maybe I should really strike out on my own and do my own thing, because then I can just focus on helping my company and helping my customers grow, but not worry about all the I don't know, the BS that happens sometimes in these other more entrenched type companies that have more of established culture that there's almost no point in fighting against.
Yeah, I mean, I found that some of the most thoughtful products that I've come across have been female formulated and female fronted, and I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that we're at a day and age now where women are no longer feeling like as much like they have to behave like men to succeed in business. Because when I first started out in business and I was in corporate, I saw a lot of that. And it was like, well, what is this perpetuating? Like there's there's good in, there are things that are positive that come out of both male and female leadership, but why do we have to be hyper masculinized to succeed in this world? Because there's so much more to it than that.
Well, sure. I mean, we've gotten much more casual in our business attire as well. I mean, we don't see power suits in the way that we used to a couple of decades ago.
God.
Power suits and all the like, exaggerated shoulder pads and all that because we needed to just feel strong when we walk into a room, right?
Right,
We
right,
don't have to do that anymore. And we can dress like the way we want to. I mean, you look at the women who show up for those amazing, blunt brunches.
right, right.
Women in their full femininity with their full attire as they are, as they present themselves to be, and completely unapologetic. And all of them are incredibly expert in their field.
Right. Yeah, they show up in their place of power and it is not in shoulder pads and a suit. And I love that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that in some ways it's like,
But they're also not showing up in hoodies feeling like, oh, I need to look like a certain way.
yeah, it's a call to show up as your authentic self and bring that to the party because I think especially because we are a growing industry, there's that space to do that. Just like when I was in tech in some of the earlier days, like in the 90s, where that was when people were like, yeah, no, we're not, unless you were like in sales, you weren't showing up in a suit. And there was just a lot of creativity and it changed the way we did business even outside of the tech industry. And I think that cannabis has that opportunity to change the way other businesses do business as well, being able to show up as your authentic self. I have to say, I love that part of it. And I think, it goes across the board, right?
Sure. When I first started working, we still had casual Fridays where you can wear jeans to work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should have like dress up Fridays so that you can actually put some nice clothes on and go to work.
I love that. Well, I've had my colleagues would laugh who knew me for a long time. They're like, when you were in corporate, you were bucking the system and you're always trying to see how casual you could be. Now that you're in an industry where it's okay to be casual, you're always dressed up. I'm like, it's that side of me that I've always got to like just do the opposite, apparently. I don't know. But
Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun that we get to be in an industry that you can show up as you are?
Yeah, I love it. I love that I can go to meetings in leather pants.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think there's a high level of acceptance of showing up as you are. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, this industry
It's almost a necessary part of actually, this is an interesting topic. It's a necessary part of gaining acceptance in this industry is allowing people to see who you are.
Yeah.
Not how you can conform to the norm, but who you are. And I think anybody who's anybody within this industry have found their way to be more engaged, entrenched, and trusted are those who are more willing to be unvarnished and who they are.
Yeah.
You almost don't gain acceptance until you're willing to show up as you are.
Yeah, you have to show up as your authentic self. You made the jump to get into this. So obviously, it's like, what are you here for? I know like my parents, well, my mother probably would not have been so excited about me going into cannabis. Not that she was super excited, but she was like, oh, Sarah just had cancer. She's having a midlife crisis. Let's humor her. But for me, it was, I didn't almost die twice to continue living a life that is not my own.
And there's a lot of bravery in these types of stories that you hear every day.
Right. Yeah. Almost all of our colleagues have a story like that brought them to this, because although it'll be interesting to see younger generations when it's normalized and it's just another industry to get into, and what captures their imagination. Because for a lot of us, it's about the innovation or the activism or, just the crazy creative people that we're drawn to in this industry. Like, what will it be in the future that gets people engaged? Will it be some of the same things?
Well, maybe it's like most things where when people start taking it for granted, then I know it sounds silly. When people start to take the acceptance or your entry into an industry for granted, maybe that's, the best outcome where you don't really think about it. It's like when you're at that bar and you're ordering a cannabis beverage and it's just like anything else. So it's reached that level of acceptance that people kind of like, yeah, I'm not thinking twice about it. It's fully accepted. It's taken for granted. So, maybe by the time, my daughter, when she's of age, that it's no longer a stigma.
Yeah. And on that note, before I do that, because we haven't talked about CCell at all. We've gone into some really great conversations. What are some of the things that are next for CCell that you're excited about, that you've been working on? Because you've had this trajectory where you've worked with all these great brands, and now you've gone into an ancillary product, and before I guess we get into that, what was something that was different about that attracted to you? That what were some of the challenges, and what are the things you're excited about? That's my question. I know it's a lot.
So I can break it down into 3 parts. There are 3 things that are really important to me when I think about an opportunity. So my 3 things are, I love building brands, I love building teams, and I love doing things that haven't been done before. And here at CCell, it allows me to do those 3 things. So I have an amazing team, both in China as well as here across the US. So the team is amazing, super hardworking, and really, really, digging into not just doing a marketing job, but like sales job, and product understanding and getting really immersed in the culture. And then the other aspect of, how do you take a component manufacturer and help it become a brand?
Right.
So for me, that's a huge challenge. Up until very recently, really, we're talking about a company that makes devices and components that are on the inside, which most of the times you can't really even see. So how do you help transition a hardware company into a technology brand? And that's what I've been working on in the last 5 months since I've been here at CCell. So giving it a purpose, really honing in and understanding what changed when CCell entered the cannabis industry in 2016. It was the first to create a disruptive product that was reliable, with its ceramic core.
I remember that. Yeah.
Devices, right? So it was for the first time you can take your cannabis with you, and it's really discreet, and you can have it on the go. Now you can travel with all your accessories for flower products and for hash and all that, but for the first time you can walk around with a device that you couldn't have before. So just think about the moments and the level of interaction you have with a cannabis plant in a completely different form factor. So that's super exciting. And in dialing that in and really looking at that time within 2016 to where it is right now, which is, what is it, a multi-billion-dollar category within the cannabis industry, and always the number 2 category, right? It's like flower, vape, and then edibles. The role that CCell played in powering that cannabis movement, empowering the development of the vape category, is something that is completely relevant and ownable for CCell. So that has been our positioning, and then that has also been our purpose. How do we continue to power the cannabis movement? So we consider ourselves to be at the core of the cannabis movement, empowering that core, both from a functional standpoint because of our ceramic core, and also from an emotional and physical standpoint, just being shoulder to shoulder with the community.
I love that.
Yeah, that has been the fun strategic work, working on the development of CCell as a real supporter of the cannabis movement, and putting that and honing in as the purpose for the brand, and then taking that strategic positioning And now, you've seen us probably at every single event in the last 4 months, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just B2B, it's B2C.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a differentiator with as far as like ancillary brands go.
So if I'm planting a flag in the sand to saying we are powering the core of the cannabis movement, we better show up. And that's where, standing shoulder to shoulder with our community, with our customers, and, our craft makers, that's really important, and it's not just about, sponsoring an event. It's about being there. It's about working it. It's about, linking arms and advocating. So a lot of what we do is really to make sure we're not just supplying components and devices. We're working with our customers to really hone in on what's the best devices for their best extracts and how do they want to bring that to market. And from a marketing standpoint, from my team and I, we're actually working with customers and our brands and helping them go to market and helping them with velocity of sell-through. So we've got a lot of what I would consider sexy marketing initiatives that are coming up in the next few weeks, where we're actually driving sell-through for some of our customers from a digital and from a performance marketing standpoint.
That's cool.
I want to come back and tell you about it once we have some data in terms of results, because it's about to be launched soon. But when I think about marketing, when they say, well, how do you know if your marketing is working? And I'm like, are you making sales?
Right.
Making sales? Are you looking at your attribution? Has your sales velocity gone up? It's not just about the impression. We can spend all the money in the world and make people love you, but ultimately it's a commercial endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, and we see, even when we look at like things like social media, people will say, oh, well, what are your numbers on social media? Well, you know what? Not everybody who's buying is following people on social media. Give me the hard facts. What's the volume that you're driving?
So from that strategic work to really important digital and performance marketing support, education support for our customers, we also have a lot of new innovations coming up. I think I showed you this one, which is a 2-gram cart that has post. It's completely postless and cottonless. It's completely new technology. And then we have new upstream products that will solve for anti-clogging and anti-leaking as well, and anti-burn.
That's awesome, because those are some of the biggest things that people bring things back to dispensaries
for. Clogging, leaking, or burning, right? Because once you've had one burnt experience, all the rest of your cart will taste burnt. It's horrible. So we've got this new technology that we've come up with, and new devices that are coming out this quarter will have anti-clogging from that standpoint, and also anti-burn, because what it does is you cannot overhit your vape. Our device will actually power down. From a safety standpoint, you don't want to constantly hit on your vape if it's burning, and that's just not safe. Yeah. And then also from the flavor experience standpoint, just to make sure that it's not burning, so that the oil and the terpenes and the cannabinoids are going to stay as they should within your device. Yeah. I'm super excited about the tech and what we're solving from a consumer standpoint and for our customers, because they're definitely a part of our roadmaps.
It's so important. It's so important. And then getting into like the big picture. What are some things beyond CCell, beyond the brands, that you're excited and hopeful about in the future of what we're all doing?
In terms of the cannabis industry as a whole, maybe this sounds kind of altruistic, is that I want us to be more collaborative as an entire industry. Yeah. We have so many incredibly smart people within our industry, and there are obviously a lot of voices on social media. And it's unfortunate that the voices that get amplified are the ones that are maybe more divisive.
Yep.
And they get a lot of impressions and comments and attention, because people tend to react to those. I think if we can take all of the incredible people within our industry and mapped out a way that could work best for all of us, we would be much further along, and we wouldn't be arguing about rescheduling, descheduling, schedule 4, schedule 3, schedule 1. We will be looking at a way in which we can stand up on our own 2 feet and not worry about, pharmaceutical and the alcohol industry, because we would have our shit together.
Agreed. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I often say, I wonder the people who are putting a lot of that stuff up, like how they have time to do their work. And maybe that's just me, but
you have to feed that machine.
Yeah. Don't worry so much about the algorithms. Worry about your work. Worry about the connections. It's so important, and together we can create some beautiful things, along with, creating a larger body to lobby for what we need, rather than putting our dissatisfaction into the ether. Take the energy and put it into the work so that we can change the way things are looking.
Amen.
Well, I'm looking forward to geeking out with you more about stuff, because you were so much fun to talk to, Angela. And for people who want to follow you on social media or check out what you're doing, how do they go about doing that?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn, not so much so on Instagram, but on LinkedIn, just find me at Angela Pih, ANGELAPIH. Offering, posting interesting topics for us to talk about, get your point of view. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Okay. Well, everyone, check it out. Angela is a wealth of information. She has, in the time that she has been in this industry, I mean, you have made so many things happen. The impact that you've had as a marketing expert and thought leader is immense. And so if you want to learn something, like, check out Angela. She throws down some really good truths, and she's made a lot of things happen. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me as a voice on your podcast.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pih on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.